Okay. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end, or you can feel free to utilize the chat box. My coworker, Becky Venus, is here to help answer questions and keep an eye on that chat box. So we're going to start how to access the RFP. So it's located on our ICJI website, which is in.gov/CJI Victim Services. And then if you scroll down, there will be some boxes that you can then click on the Learn More on the STOP grant box. And then you'll find the STOP RFP for 2022. I also have provided the link there. You can either copy that down, or this should get posted as with the video in a week or two at least. Okay. So the application did open on Monday, June 27th at 9 a.m. and it closes Monday, July 25th at 11:59 p.m. Applicants are strongly encouraged to submit applications 48 hours prior to the deadline. The award period for the STOP grant is October 1st, 2022 until September 30th, 2023, which makes this a 12-month award period. So projects should begin on October 1st, 2022 and must be in operation no later than 60 days after this date. Failure to have the funded project operational within 60 days will result in cancellation of the grant and deobligation of all awarded funds. So just a quick overview, the Services Training Officers and Prosecutors Violence Against Women Formula Grant Program supports communities, including American Indian tribes and Alaska Native villages, in their efforts to develop and effective responses to sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. So eligible entities include state agencies, units of local government, nonprofit organizations, and faith-based organizations. A couple other requirements is the registered UEI number. This does replace the DUNS number. Active and current registration with SAM.gov. The determination of suitability to interact with participating minor certificate, and good standing with the Department of Revenue, Department of Workforce Development, and Secretary of State. So of the award amount that we receive, we have to meet certain percentages of program types when we distribute the awards. So this is kind of the allocations that we have to use. So 5% to court programs, 25% to law enforcement, 25% to prosecution, and 30% to victim services, and then 15% to state's discretion. So of the 30% of the victim services allocation, 10% goes to culturally specific community-based organizations. And then 20% amongst two of these categories above must be allocated for programs or projects that meaningfully address sexual assault, including stranger rape, acquaintance rape, alcohol or drug facilitated rape, and rape within the context of intimate partner relationship. One thing to remember is if we are funding a prosecutor's office, but if it's a victim advocate within the prosecutor's offices, then that goes under victim services and not prosecution. Okay, so purpose areas. Funds under this program must be used for one or more of the following purposes: training law enforcement officers, judges, other court personnel, and prosecutors to more effectively identify and respond to violent crimes against women; developing, training, or expanding units of law enforcement officers, judges, other court personnel, and prosecutors specifically targeting violent crimes against women; developing and implementing more effective police, court, and prosecution policies, protocols, orders, and services specifically devoted to preventing, identifying, and responding to violent crimes against women; developing, installing, or expanding data collection and communication systems, including computerized systems, linking police, prosecutors, and courts for the purpose of identifying, classifying, and tracking arrests, protection orders, violation of protection orders, prosecutions, and convictions; developing, enlarging, or strengthening victim services and legal assistance programs, developing, enlarging, or strengthening programs addressing the needs and circumstances of Indian tribes in dealing with violent crimes against women, supporting formal and informal statewide multidisciplinary efforts to the extent not supported by state funds to coordinate response. Training of sexual assault forensic medical personnel examiners in the collection and preservation of evidence, analysis, prevention, and providing expert testimony and treatment of trauma related to sexual assault. Developing, enlarging, or strengthening programs to assist law enforcement, prosecutors, courts, and others to address the needs and circumstances of individuals 50 years of age or over, individuals with disabilities, and deaf individuals who are victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, or stalking. Providing assistance to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault in immigration matters. Maintaining core victim services and criminal justice initiatives while supporting complementary new initiatives and emergency services for victims and their families. Supporting the placement of special victim assistants in local law enforcement agencies to serve as liaisons. Developing and promoting state, local, tribal legislation and policies that enhance best practices for responding to sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. Developing, implementing, or enhancing sexual assault response teams. Developing and strengthening policies, protocols, best practices, and training for law enforcement agencies and prosecutors. Developing, enlarging, or strengthening programs addressing sexual assault against men, women, and youth in correctional and detention settings. Identifying and conducting inventories of backlogs of sexual assault evidence collection kits and developing protocols and policies for responding to and addressing such backlogs. Developing, enhancing, or strengthening programs and projects to improve evidence collection methods for victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, including through funding for technology that better detects bruising and injuries across skin tones and related training. Developing, enhancing, or strengthening culturally specific victim services programs to provide culturally specific victim services and responses to female genital mutilation or cutting. Providing victim advocates in state or local law enforcement agency prosecutors' offices and courts, and providing supportive services and advocacy to Indian victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Paying any fees charged by any governmental authority for furnishing a victim or the child of a victim with any of the following documents: a birth certificate or passport of the individual as required by law, an identification card issued to the person by a state or tribe that shows that the person is a resident of the state or member of the tribe. So a few out-of-scope activities include research projects, services provided to youth under the age of 11, or services to those above the age of 10 who are seeking services for victimization that occurred when they were under the age of 11, and activities that jeopardize victim safety, deter or prevent physical or emotional healing for victims, or allow offenders to escape responsibility for their actions. So other requirements are some trainings, the determination of suitability to interact with participating minors. This is every 5 years. Additional background checks must be run on any grant or match-funded employees, including volunteers, that interact with anyone under the age of 18. This is a required condition of the DOJ grant, so for more details, you can visit that website. The civil rights training. This is another DOJ requires all recipients and subrecipients of federal funds to comply with a variety of federal civil rights laws. CJI has a checklist that each subgrantee needs to complete on an annual basis to remain in compliance. I did forget about the determination of suitability. There is a form that we've created that has to be signed and sent or attached to the grant. And then the last one is the CJI Grantee Training and Resources link. So this is where you can find all of our webinars, all of our videos that we post online. A couple of trainings that I want to mention that I think are some good ones to be watched is there's a grant writing training on there, and then there's also a training about how to complete the subgrantee basic budget. But there's more trainings than just those. I just think those are some good ones to watch. So initiating an application, you do this on Intelligrant, so there is the link for that. So once you get to that link, you log into your account. If you don't have an account, then you can follow the steps on there by clicking New User. So then once you get that done, you can log in, and then on the My Home screen, you'll view available proposals. Then you can click on the View Opportunities, and once you're there, it'll take you to the My Opportunities page, which you can then find the 2022 STOP grant application and select Apply Now. So this is what the page will look like when you log into Intelligrants. In the red box is that View Available Proposals and the View Opportunities button that you'll push. So now we can talk about the actual application itself. Once you start an application, this is what it'll look like. In the red box there, it's the Forms menu, and that's where you will navigate to fill out all the different forms that are required. So the forms, the forms that need to be completed are required are the contact, project information, programmatic information, problem statement and analysis, goals, objectives, and outcomes, program descriptions, evidence-based/best practices, use of volunteers, budget narrative, and the attachment section. So the contact, this is the points of contact for your grant. This is where we find the information when we notify you of the award notice. The project information page, your SAMS registration goes here and must be up to date. As well, an audit is attached if you receive more than $750,000 in federal grant funds. Programmatic information, this is the information about your proposed STOP grant. And the problem statement and analysis. Goals, objectives, and outcomes. So the goal should directly address the problem identified in the problem statement. Objectives are the steps needed to achieve this goal. So objectives should be concrete, action-oriented, and specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. An example would be by September 2022, a minimum of 50 culturally and linguistically appropriate support groups for survivors of domestic violence will be provided. So then outcomes measure objectives and are criteria for how the program is deemed to be effective. So an example of an outcome would be 85% of participants will indicate that they have learned ways to act in their own best interest. Program description, this is the what, who, where, why, when, how. And then you have the evidence-based best practice and then the use of volunteers. So a couple important notes that I want to mention. Grants cannot be processed until ICJI receives its federal award letter, which more than likely will be delayed pending the passage of the federal budget. So just please be aware of this as you are writing your proposal. All grants from ICJI Victim Services are reimbursement grants, which means that agencies must first incur the expense prior to CJI reimbursing for that expense. Verification of expenses along with verification of payment of expenses must be provided to ICJI on a monthly or quarterly basis prior to reimbursement. The match required for STOP is 25% for only government agencies. So going along matching funds must be verifiable from the subgrantee's records, not be included as contributions for any federal award, be necessary and reasonable for the accomplishment of the project or program objectives, be allowable under 2 CFR Part 200, Subpart 400, not be paid by the federal government under another federal award except where authorized by the federal statute, be included in the subgrantee's approved budget, and conform to all other provisions of 2 CFR Part 200. So here's an example of how to find what your match will be. So step 1 would be to take your awarded amount and divide it by the percent of federal share, which will then equal your total project cost. So you then take that total project cost and subtract your award amount, and that is your required match. So an example would be if a grant recipient is awarded $150,000 in federal funding and there is a 25% match requirement. So step 1 would be your award amount $150,000 divided by the federal share, which would be 75% since 25 is the match. So that equals $200,000 for your total project cost. So then you take that, subtract your award, and so that 200,000 minus the 150,000 award will equal your 50,000 required match. So some ineligible budget items include administrative costs over 10% of the total grant budget, direct financial assistance to a client such as cash, gift cards, or checks, food and beverages, lobbying and or fundraising, immigration fees, purchase of real estate, construction, physical modification to buildings including minor renovations such as painting or carpeting, vehicles. Overtime is allowed, but to claim the increased rate, there must be a separate line item in the budget that includes the overtime rate of pay. This also goes for the benefits. If you wish to claim FICA on that overtime amount, you need to have a separate FICA line for the overtime. And then costs may not be included or used to meet match requirements of any other federal grant. The budget narrative. So be sure all items that are in the budget are included in the budget narrative. For example, in supplies, if you write office supplies on the budget line, then in the narrative you need to then explain what that includes, so copy paper, pencil, pens, etc. Grant reviewers are not required to contact you for clarification, and any missing information in the section may disqualify that budget item for funding. The attachment section. So attachments required include total agency budget. That can be found on our website as well. The link is provided. On the website, it's called Subgrantee Basic Budget, and in parentheses, the Nonprofit Application Budget Form. This is also one of the trainings that I mentioned would be good. This is what it's over, is this total agency budget. And then the sustainability plan, which your plan is to maintain the program once the grant funds expire. Timeline outlining the completion of the project or expenditures of the grant funds. Letters of endorsement, these need to be program specific. And then under the miscellaneous, you'll attach any job descriptions for any of the positions listed in personnel. If applicable, any contracts. The consultation form, an example of this is on the last page of the RFP. Your EEOP certification. Legal services certification form, again, example is located on the last page of the RFP. And then the signed determination of suitability form. So just a quick note about supplanting. Federal funds must be used to supplement existing funds for program activities and cannot replace or supplement non-federal funds that have been appropriated for the same purpose. Supplanting occurs when a state, local, or tribal government reduces state, local, or tribal funds for an activity specifically because federal funds are available or expected to be available to fund the same activity. So for technical assistance, contact the CJI Help Desk at cjihelpdesk@cji.in.gov. Their hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30, except state holidays. Another reminder, ICJI is not responsible for technical issues with grant submission within 48 hours of grant deadline. But for any other assistance with requirements of the solicitation, you can contact the Victim Services Division at ICJI. So I think that is the end of the presentation that I have. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and I know Becky's looking over that. I'll see if I can pop that up as well.
Hi, Margaret. So in your question, you're asking if you include everything for your program. In the subgrantee basic budget, you will include everything for your program. In your application, in the budget line items, you would include only what you are seeking grant funds for. Does that help answer your question? We are not aware of, at this time, of any categories that will not be funded. You're welcome.
I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. This is going to be my contact information, but please feel free to keep putting questions in the chat if you have any. Okay. Are there any other questions in the chat?
Yes, we have a question from Margaret about just to confirm, non-government agencies are required match.
No, just government agencies, right? Becky, do you agree?
Yes, government agencies only.
Perfect. If there aren't any more questions, then this concludes the presentation. So thank you everybody for attending.